I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. So today, we'll do chapters 3 and 4, and who knows, maybe we'll move on to 5. So here we finally get to the subject of our daimon, right? And we'll also talk about the question about the world soul's daimon, whether it has a separate daimon. Um, the background here we've mostly seen it's this question about whether the daimon is chosen or whether it's received. Right? In the Republic, it says that it's chosen, the and in the Phaedo, it says it's received, it's allotted, and also in the Phaedo, this allotted or received daimon has a function of guiding us after death. And so Plotinus will be mentioning both of these things. So here is the Phaedo passage that Plotinus will mention. So the guardian spirit was allotted to him in life, proceeds to lead him to a certain place. Right? This is important because the path in the afterlife is complicated if you don't have a guide, you can get lost. Again, the well-ordered and wise soul follows the guide. And at the beginning, there is an issue with McKenna's translation. So if you check out McKenna's translation, you'll see that he reads this as, "What then is the spirit?" And then he adds, "Guiding the present life and determining the future. The spirit of here and now, and the God of here and now. Spirit, God, this in act within us conducts every life, for even here and now it is the dominant of our nature." Um, McKenna has separated this um, from the previous passage. And um, I agree with the Gerson translation that that is a mistake. And so he's ignored the proper context. The question is not what is the spirit, but rather he's been talking about how each person is reborn as what they've lived as. And so the question is not what is the spirit, but who is the spirit? Who then will become a daimon? The one who is one in the sensible world. Who will become a god, in fact, is the one who is one in the sensible world, right? And so this points to possibilities of more than human lives. That makes sense because in the previous passage, he made it all the way just to, people who become animals of many kinds, or even they become human beings, right? As McKenna has it, observance of civic and secular virtue makes man again. Or where the merit is less marked, one of the animals of communal tendency, a bee or the like. So it would be natural for them to say, oh, but what about the person who is more than a human being, who behaves like more than just having a political virtue? Well, then that's what this passage goes on to address. Who then will become a daimon, the one who has won the sensible world, who will become a god. In fact, it is the one who is in the sensible world. And then he explains, for that which is active in each person will direct him, and then the Gerson translators after death, inasmuch as it is also that which leads him in the sensible world. Um, Here and now is a better translation than sensible world. I mean, I think I would prefer it. It's more direct, but so because sometimes just often uses here when he means the perceptible, just the same way that he uses there to indicate the intelligible. Um, and and so that's the first few um, lines of this chapter. And since they continue the thought of the previous chapter, they could even belong to it. You could do the chapter break after this. And so you can start reading with the paragraph that comes right after this, the one that says, "That is
Okay.
to say."
Okay, so the basic idea is something um like you can be reincarnated as an animal or as a plant, like if you're busy treeing and so on, then you could also be reincarnated, so to speak, or not gonna be reincarnated, but as a god or a spirit, whatever that is, because you have chosen that kind of life.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and you say it rightly. It's not properly reincarnated in that sense. It's rather that you're not reincarnated,
Yeah, it's
right? You stay up there.
disincarnate. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You stay up there. And I mean, this is pretty a pretty extreme version of transmigration. Rarely do um, Platonists have this view where you can even become a daimon or a god. They usually think that, you know, you could every every being always just stays in its own rank. And it corresponds to the fact that also in this treatise, the Plotinus says that you can even become you can even become a plant. Um, and of course, there's a question about um, souls that are perpetually divine and wise, things like the heavenly bodies and the whole world. We'll talk about the whole world in a minute, well, in a few minutes. And um, and sometimes probably doesn't have that in mind because those you would never have chosen, or if they choose, it's in some kind of, you know, perpetual choice or some kind of something that's even more allegorical. It would be some kind of eternal choosing. Right?
Mm.
But you know, there are many spirits that thus accompany the heavenly bodies, or accompany the gods, as they say, as it said in the Phaedrus, and also presumably other gods. And so you could say that they're, you know, these are probably the gods that people can become. Remember also Empedocles becoming a god at the end of his life. Right? Um, so yeah, and and then this brings him to the question about our allotted spirit, finally.
Okay. Now, that is to say that the dominant is the spirit which takes possession of the human being at birth. No.
Okay.
Okay, that's a question. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, he translates here the dominant because he introduced it before. Um, and yeah, so he's asking, he's this is the spirit which takes possession of the human being at birth. That's a quote from the Phaedo, right? And so he's been saying, oh, the right, we become what rules in us, the most you know, the dominant element of our soul. And so he asks, so is that the daimon? And then his answer is no.
Oh, okay.
So
No, the dominant. Tati is not available. Mommy's not back. She's gonna come back. The dominant, okay, is the prior of the individual spirit. It presides inoperative, while its secondary acts, while its secondary acts. So that if the acting force is that of men of the sense life, that tutelary spirit is the rational being. While, okay, so his idea is that the dominant or the dominant in the life is not is the one lower or something like that.
exactly.
The because the
Yeah.
spirit is sort of what guides you, not what you are.
Right.
While if we live by that rational being, our tutelary spirit, or that's just the word daimon, is the still higher being, not directly operative, but assenting to the working principle. Um, Being not directly operative, but yeah, the words you shall yourself choose your presiding spirit are true then. For by our life we elect our own loftier.
Okay. So here he connects the Phaedo with the Republic, right? So the Republic says that we choose our daimon, and he says, yes, we do choose our daimon because we choose how we live, and our daimon is the next, is the next thing, the thing immediately superior to the dominant force in our lives. So if we live a life of sense, then the spirit is the rat. So what is this rational being? You can understand it as, I mean, in Greek, to logistikon, the expression can just mean our thinking faculty, the reasoning power. You could take it also, however, in a more general sense, in some senses, rationality. Um, and if you want to preserve some kind of separation. And And then in every case, it's not something that directly acts in our life, but is something higher. Um, and you see here a bit about so especially with this coming right after the discussion about who is a daimon and who is a god, it also means that if you choose to live a daimonic life, right, which is presumably someone who lives according to nous, then your daimon will be something even higher, will be a god. And that was the puzzle about that Porphyry raised in the life of Plotinus, right? Where they did this ceremony to invoke Plotinus's daimon, and it appeared that it was actually a god. And the Egyptian said, "Wow, you're a very lucky man." Um, and and so that's in part like the connection between this text and the episode in the life. Um, right. Yeah, I'll have more to say about this, but we can continue.
Mhm. So that just if I follow the like logic, the point of it being if it would be uh given to you, then it would have to be the same thing as you or something like that.
I think it's if it were given to you, then you wouldn't have the opportunity to become uh, better or worse. You wouldn't be able to choose what's your dominant thing because the higher thing would be determined. So if it was given to you that your daimon is rationality, then you could never be more than someone who lives according to the senses.
Okay, and since it's this thing which I don't understand how it's supposed to work, which is like the thing before, then like it makes more sense because you choose your like this secondary thing, the life, your life, and then somehow, but it means I don't know, like somehow what does it mean? Like what happens?
Well, I mean, so I think he's thinking about like things like um so he's thinking concretely things like Socrates' Daimon. And so this idea that there is some spirit that through inspiring thoughts and images in your head, or also sometimes by arranging coincidences and things, gives you signs about what you're supposed to do. And his his idea here is that this spirit won't necessarily be always the same kind of thing. Rather, it's always one thing. It always belongs to one rung of being higher than you, and and therefore, like if you choose to live a life of the senses, if you like dedicate yourself to just to eating, drinking, and sleeping, then you have, by the same token, you've chosen that, like the limit of your life. And so like the higher thing that limits and constrains your life and it indicates you where to go, that is then something that belongs to reason. If you if you choose and if you live a life that's according to reason, then what's higher will be nous, right? Will be this daimon. If you choose to live a life of nous, then this what's higher will be presumably somehow connected to the one or something like
So something like um because I'm trying to think like it, if someone tells me like if you choose like oh, somehow you can choose or whatever, you can choose to live, different kind of lives, and that means that you will be like sort of like if we have this like Platonic like hierarchy of principles, you will be led by that kind of principle. Like if you make pleasure your God or your like um, measure of everything, then pleasure is leading you. But now that would make sense. But now you're saying, well, it's sort of like if you make pleasure, for example, your guide, then something higher than that will be leading you. Or maybe not will be leading you, but will be, so that's the point, will be like, who is your,
Well,
something like, what is your good inclinations? Like something like when you're not thinking of pleasure, what are you going to, like something like people, maybe something like this, people who live for pleasure or of some kind like they still think like, okay, what would it be if I wouldn't? Or like, when do I do my good deeds? And then they think, okay, it would be doing something reasonable or something like that. And
right.
but if there's a person who already is living by reason, then it's not that he's really good because the good doesn't stop there. So he would be also thinking like, what am I? That would be like his bad, like his normal or something like that. And then he would say like, when am I doing something good? Oh, it's when I'm doing something more separate or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so if we think back to the life of Plotinus, we saw that he seems to identify Porphyry seems to identify the daimon with the higher self, right? And and so you can say, yeah, so your higher self is always more than whatever you've chosen for yourself, right? And so this is as it were, and so it's not that, and that also means like that the higher self is always in some sense attainable for Plotinus. It's not that, like the higher self of everyone is this um perfect voice of the good that can be infinitely far away from people. No, it's always just the next best thing, right?
Right. And that is somehow like it doesn't make sense like in this way and like the way like where people always like think of some kind like have conflicts and like have a higher thing, but the point would be that even this higher thing would be limited by what your lower thing is. Like since there's higher things above the higher things, so the higher thing for a although like they're all okay, so maybe like this, although all these really exist, right? It's not the case that there is a soul anywhere that doesn't have a God at the beginning of its chain. It's
Right.
just that for you or for whatever your awareness or something like that, you will not know about it. And whatever you know
Yeah,
about, you could sort of like think or something like of one higher, something like that. Or maybe it will sometimes send you signs like I'm not sure like Socrates was living, I don't know what kind of life, and his daimon was something different. It was just stopping
yeah,
him from doing things.
right. The
And but Socrates is supposed
um
to be the best guy. I don't know if he's the best guy for Plotinus. Is he?
that is a question. I'm not quite sure what Plotinus's considered view on Socrates is. But I mean, yeah, but yeah. I mean, I think the tendency would be to think that he is living the best life. So his diamond should also be a god. Um, and maybe that's why it's always negative because it's like only apophatic, doesn't reveal anything. Um, but um, to one way of thinking about this is also to think about like one way of thinking. So I mentioned like there's this um as it were psychologizing way of thinking about the daimon as the voice of conscience. So even if it's something like a superego, but and I mean that function is compatible with the daimon also existing separately. But so you can think about, the daimon as representing the in like if fortune, if chance is limit is external necessity, right? There are all these things that we don't choose because, they just happen from the outside and we don't control them. There's also internal necessity, right? There's things things that we see are true and we can't ignore, or also, moral duties that we perceive and we can't ignore, like, oh, I have to help this person. And and so the idea here might be that, for depending on what you choose, and like neither of these are things that we choose, right? We find moral duty or we find a truth as something in some sense given, but it's not given outside, it's given inside, right? And so it's distinct from what we choose. So if the life we want, if the life we're living is the life of pleasure, then the things that we're going to encounter inside as internal barriers that we of course don't always respect are rational ones. Whereas if the life we want, if the life we choose, is a life of reason, then the internal barrier that we find is one to do with nous, right? With intellective apprehension,
Hmm. Yes.
insights. Um, so it's like a flexible theory about what the um, exactly what is the character of conscience.
I see. Something like, I mean, most people are basically the same, but like something like if you would be a fully rational person, then like this would be some kind of theory of prophecy, like something like then your conscience would be uh like where that doesn't help you or something like that.
What doesn't help you?
Like people are always, I mean, like people are always look or some people are always looking for like things that are beyond reason or whatever reason is. And
Right.
then this answer here would be something like most people don't actually need anything beyond reason, or that's not their problem because they're not even reasonable. But if you would be
Right.
reasonable, and this is why, like, to the extent that you have like a something like a God or a conscience or whatever, the thing that tells you what to do, like in the good sense, like in the overcoming or whatever, it's not, it's just reason for the most part. But if you would be fully reasonable, or maybe in the moments that you are, I don't know if it could work for a minute, then the sort of, and then like maybe there's some questions that are not decidable by reason, or some facts of the world which that doesn't include, or this kind of reason, then you're like the thing, like you said, limiting you, like then you would need some kind of beyond reason, like advice or
R-
guidance or something like that.
Right. I mean, we can flesh this out using the theory of virtue from the other treatise. So let's say you are someone who is, moderate, you don't eat too much, and you're only angry when someone has really done something wrong, and even then when you correct them, you don't burst out, you just express the issue in an assertive and clear manner, and you have an organized life where the center of that life is, like, say, studying or something like that. But then even then you might have times where you think, well, actually I should be a vegetarian. And actually, or, actually I don't really need even to sleep that much or things like that. And oh, it's just a concession to my body that I, watch some stupid TV series occasionally. And so it would be that kind of concern which would, be the next higher thing, right? Whereas if you are someone who's already, eats fasting regularly and not even eating any meat, really you spend all your time helping people or studying and all that, then maybe your concerns you could still have, higher concerns, that things of you could think, oh, I'm still thinking of myself as an embodied being, and I forget that this is all a dream and that this isn't who I really am, and things like that. So it's a theory about human action that, it's because you might think, right, that there is like, okay, you might like feel that there's a higher ideal, a higher calling that you're not fulfilling, or that you're trying step by step to fulfill more. And you might have an idea that when you fulfill all that, you'll be done. Whereas Plotinus is saying, no, this is a structure of human action, that there's always this other step, right? And it's not that you fulfill a certain moral ideal, and then there are no longer any ideals. No, it's part of human life has this tension always towards this higher level.
Hmm. Okay.
Um,
Um,
so
Let me go back
you
to the
can,
text.
yeah,
So yeah, so you shall choose. Okay, so that's right. You choose something like okay. But so something like you choose your next step by choosing this step. That's like the way he's saying it.
hmm
But how does on the other side? But how does this spirit come to be the determinant of our fate? Um,
A determinant of our fate is McKenna's explanation of just how does this spirit lead us, or why does the spirit lead us, which is the word in the Phaedo. That's what he's speaking.
mhm, okay. It is not when the life is ended that it conducts us here or there. It operates during the lifetime. When we cease to live, our death hands over to another principle this energy of our own personal career. Didn't understand that
Right.
principle. Should I continue?
No, I can explain. So he says that it's going to have to lead us somehow in this life. Why? Um, I take it that he's referring to what he said before. So once you die, and then the life you led gives you this formed character, which means that you're going to pick such and such a life. Say, if you liked astronomy too much, you become a bird, right? So the leading, if it's going to be some kind of like moral influence, has to happen during our life, right? If it's even if you're saying, oh, it leads us to our next life, well, but we choose our next life by our choices here now. So it has to lead us now.
Okay. That principle of the new birth strives to gain control. And if it succeeds, it also lives on itself. So the principle, meaning the thing that you chose, the diamond, the next thing will try to gain control. And if it succeeds, it also lives and itself in turn possesses a guiding spirit as its next higher. If, on the contrary, it is weighed down by the developed evil in the character, the spirit of the previous life pays the penalty. The evil liver loses grade, so he will, I don't know what will happen to the spirit, something like will disappear or go away, I don't know. The evil liver loses grade because during his life, the active principle of his being took the tilt towards the brute by the force of affinity. Right? If you follow a lower form of life and then you become that, and then sort of this higher guiding spirit that you had here will, I don't know what will happen with it, but then this life sort of would be the guiding, like something like that. Like if you become an animal in the next life, then the human that you've been in this life is the spirit for the next life or something. I don't know if animals have
Yeah,
guiding spirits, but yeah.
yeah. So later Neoplatonists will take this up in a different way. They'll say, that when you're reborn as an animal, then you're not you don't really inhabit the animal body the way you inhabit a human body. Rather, your connection with the animal is like the connection of a daimon with you, right? So you're just as it were influencing from the outside, sending signs and so on to the animal, um, but not actually controlling that. So that's what those later Platonists will do. Here, um, so it's here I'm not sure if he has any view about what happens to, the daimon, but I think it could, it would be consistent, I think, to interpret Plotinus in a more direct fashion. Indeed, who you were, right, what your dominant element in this life will become the daimon of the next life.
Okay. If on the contrary, the man is able to follow the leading of his higher spirit, so like the diamond succeeds, sort of, and he rises, and he lives that spirit. That noblest part of himself to which he is being led becomes sovereign in his life. This made his own, he works for the next above until he has attained the height.
Right. So yeah, this is the passage is a bit expressed tight, condensed, and also I think, for instance, McKenna might make it a bit more complicated than it needs to. For instance, when he says the principle of the new birth, but that's not important. It's not important that it's the next life or anything. It's just what matters is that it's that um, our um, uh, our daimon, in principle, wants us to um, gain control and be live like it. Um, but we can the opposite can always happen. And but yeah, he's describing this process that the um, how does the daimon lead us? It seems to lead us in a sense like a final cause, right? So it's not the dominant force, and so it's not as it were, the efficient cause of our actions, but it is available as some kind of ideal or higher cause, and that's how it leads us during this life, even though it is, as he says, inoperative, right?
Because it's towards it, and then somehow, so, but it sort of can't, the point is, it sort of can't win, or or in the next life, it's always going to win. Like how, if you're going,
Right. I think there is some kind of important role for death here. Because presumably there's this idea that each life a life is not just a moral thing. I mean, that goes together also with the in general idea of transmigration. Rather, for that each kind of life has a specific body that's fit for it, and or lack of body, or maybe it's a less material body. But anyway, there are different bodies for different lives. And so, in some sense, for you to fully live according to a higher principle, you're going to need a better body. And so, this body has to die before that can fully happen.
mhm. And but on the other hand, I would ask, like, what is so good? Like, why is death going to make sure that you have the next level? Like, what if, I mean, if someone is like has this diamond, and you say like it tells him sometimes, like it's like how, like, does it seem it should make a difference how much of the time you follow it or something like that? Like, it is it like something like you've been struggling towards something, but maybe not succeeding, or by definition not succeeding because you can't become that something, and then somehow death solves the struggle because what? I mean,
Hmm. Well, I mean, I think there are two questions here. One question is like, why do you then choose the higher life? presumably the idea there has to do with, well, in some sense, your this the beginning, middle, and end of your life was, in some sense, the formation of a certain character. And so once this is done, the character is formed, and then it chooses in one way and not another. Um, and so that's a cool question. The question, however, of like, why does death solve this? Well, maybe because the idea is that why we struggle is because we're attached to a body or to a wrong body. And so you think about um, Socrates' description of philosophy as learning to die. And so presumably, the philosopher, he accustoms himself to, not caring about pleasures and pains and contemplating the forms, cultivating intellectual insight into matters. And however, the very fact that he has to do like ascetic practices and fasting and so on, that shows that there are limits here. And, and he would like to, he would like to be free of this mortal coil. Right? And the funny thing here, however, is that according to this theory of Plotinus's, also people who are hedonists are practicing to die. But they're frustrated not that they have too coarse or material a body, it's that they have too human a body. And so they're anxious to move on to being wolves and monkeys and things like that. Whereas Socrates and the philosophers are anxious to become spirits, in some sense. The or they want to become octopi. So they have eight tentacles to grab things with. I think there's some trope about octopi as thieves or something like that. And so, so I think there's, in some sense, yeah, death allows, in some sense, some kind of change of circumstance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the mechanics of how that happens, well, then, I mean, Plotinus doesn't spell that out here. I guess that's when, that's what later Neoplatonists will try to do with all the detailed theories about what's a pneumatic body and how do we use it, things like that. But yeah, I think that's the significance of death here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, okay. Four. Okay, we'll see. Four. The soul is many things, is all, is the above and the beneath to the totality of life. And each one of us is an intellectual cosmos, linked to the world, to this world by what is lowest in us, but by what is high, by what is the highest to the divine intellect. By all that is intellective, we are permanently in that higher realm. But at the fringe of the intellectual, we are fettered to the lower. It is as if we gave birth from it some emanation towards the lower, or rather some act, which, however, leaves our diviner part not in itself diminished.
Right. So here there's an interesting move that um, it's common to say that soul is in a sense all things. Even Aristotle says this. Aristotle says this because he's talking about knowledge. But here the idea is that the soul is all things because it can become all things. And this theme will later really be picked up by Pico della Mirandola in Oration on the Dignity of Man. Right? So like that's why he says the man has this dignity. He can become everything. Um, but and so that's the way. So the soul, in sense, has to have everything because it can become everything. It can live all these different lives. So he's going back to what he said at the beginning. I think that the soul, because it moves itself, is or it takes care of all things in the cosmos. And but having all these models of everything in it, it's an intellectual cosmos. Right? And so here we get to the specific Platinian thing that then that means that we all have, as it were, this divine intellect in us. And this is, the divine thing that Platinian thing that there is that we have this higher self that's always contemplating the divine intellect in us. Um, and However, then we have this emanation from us, or this image that we project down here, and that's what gives life to the body, right? So right, it's the each soul is, as it were, a nous, which has models for all the different kinds of living beings, and it gives life to a certain living being because there's some activity that is dependent on that model, and that is an image of that model of in that soul in a given body. Um, and so here he connects this back to the idea to these Platonian ideas. Again, he doesn't talk about daimon here, but what the daimon did was actually introduce also the higher things into the soul. And we can understand here also why you could identify, someone's daimon with their higher part, like with a. So daimon in one sense is always the next highest thing, but then in another sense would be always the highest thing. As it were, the next highest is always trying to be the highest. Um, and and right, so the soul also includes within it daimon and God. Um, and then he, but then this raises a question also because since we always have to, um, mm, since there's this cosmological function of giving life to all the bodies, and filling the world with life, you can think about, well, then do we always have to stay down here? Right? And that's the question that uh, um, the next chapter gives rise to.
Okay, but is this lower extremity of our intellective phase fettered to body forever? No. If we turn, this turns by the same act, meaning this the lower extremity, is like
Yeah,
part where it's connected to the body.
right.
And
Yeah, you can read the next.
yeah, he just and says no, but doesn't. And the soul of the all, are we to think that when it turns from this sphere, its lower phase similarly withdraws? No, for it never accompanied that lower phase of itself. It never knew any coming, and therefore never came down. It remains unmoved above, and the material frame of the universe draws close to it, and as it were, takes light from it, no hindrance to it, in no way troubling it, simply lying unmoved before it.
Right. So here he starts to talk about the soul of the universe because he says, well, are we always then attached to a body with our activity? Do we always have to pay attention to bodies in some sense? And then he says, no, when we pay attention to nous, we turn towards nous and we join with nous. But what about the soul of the universe? He could also ask about the soul of the heavenly bodies, right? Like, don't they always have to pay attention to bodies? And then he says, no, actually not. What happens is that it always is concentrated in it, and its body is turned towards it without it being turned towards this body. And here, of course, he's thinking about what Plato says in the Timaeus. So we saw this a bit before because we saw the question about um, whether the God we're supposed to imitate is the universe. But here he's bringing it up here. here he's bringing it up for a different reason. He's bringing up uh, the self-sufficiency of the world. And now that we come back to it after having seen the Alcibiades, it takes on a different meaning. Because here he says, this is the Timaeus describing giving shape to the world. The appropriate shape for that living thing, that is to contain within itself all the living things, would be the one which embraced within itself all the shapes there are. Hence he gave it a round shape, the form of a sphere, with its center equidistant from its extremes in all directions. This of all shapes is the most complete and most like itself, which he gave it to it because he believed that likeness is incalculably more excellent than unlikeness. And he gave it a smooth, round finish all over on the outside for many reasons. It needed no eyes, since there was nothing visible left outside of it, nor ears, since there was nothing audible. And so he goes, denies it having all the different kinds of organs, and so it doesn't need all these different things that keep our head from being completely smooth. And uh, anything that it did or experienced, it was designed to do or experience within itself and by itself. So the builder thought that if it were self-sufficient, it would be a better thing than if it required other things. Now, what I meant by that we read this differently once we've taken a look at the Alcibiades and the idea of the higher self is this that he mentions that it has a smooth, round finish. The smooth is that laos that we saw that's used by Plato to indicate that the nous, in some sense, is the shiny part of the soul that can then reflect the other soul, right? In which it's where the soul can see itself. And so when he says it's all round and it's smooth, it's as it were a huge eye. Of course, what does this eye see? Nothing outside of it, but rather it sees all the forms, right? Um, the the world contains images of all the forms in a sense because it can receive them because it's all smooth on the outside, right? And here he just gives all these negative reasons that it doesn't need any of the senses. But the point here, but it could be suggested also, he says that there are many reasons for why it is smooth, is that also this idea that it is reflecting the forms or the intellect, right? Nous in the Timaeus. Something that also suggests this is that later on he continues this theme of the self-sufficiency of the world. And he says, the world keeps its own company without requiring anything else. For its knowledge of and friendship with itself is enough. All this then explains why this world which he, the demiurge, begat for himself is a blessed God. And so this friendship with itself, this throws us back. This, first of all, seems to imply some kind of duality. But then again, it throws us back to this idea of the soul knowing itself in the nous of another, or in this case, knowing itself in its own nous. Right? And we saw that, there were good Platonic reasons to think that the Alcibiades model could already, for Plato, be telescoped into a single individual. And and so this was how Plotinus, conceives of you turning to your higher self. It's like you turning to a teacher, like Alcibiades should have turned towards Socrates and seen himself there and learned to see himself through Socrates' eyes. And so here the world in which is imperfectly happy is a friend of itself, right? And so this matches the fact that it's just one smooth surface. So it's just perfect reflection of its higher self, of the nous. And this also reminds me here of the myth of Plato's Symposium, right? Where we are the original human beings are spherical, like the heavenly bodies, he says. And of course, originally they are two people perfectly united with each other. And of course, then they're split and by Zeus, because otherwise they'd be too divine, too powerful, and so on. But there's this ideal here of like unity, and we can think of the and if we think of that the ideal erotic relationship in like the Symposium or the Phaedrus is between someone and this uh, between a beloved and their lover that teaches them about to act like their god. And so then it does seem to be, as it were, a union between a person and their daimon would be the ideal case of this. And then the spherical form of the world and of also the heavenly bodies is, as it were, their spheres because they're always joined to their daimones. That's what I'm suggesting. Um, and so this is, in a sense, uh, the idea here of the perfect life of the world. And so, in a sense, um, they are always turned towards nous following this interpretation of the Timaeus.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, um, hmm, where am I? Um, but the idea is that where was I? The world's soul is not embodied or is
So the idea is that the world soul, I mean, it's embodied in the sense that there is a body that lives because of it, the world, but it is not embodied in the sense that it actually pays attention to it. Anything that
hmm
means.
okay, and therefore it's something like the world is always in the way. No, but a human being is never like that. Like never like that as long as
I
he's
think,
in his
yeah,
body.
yeah, I
And
think because
and
the human being, when it turns its attention away from bodies, it also no longer gives life to a body. Um, what's different here is the bodies. So the world is a body that by its own nature is turned towards a soul, right? The world soul. Whereas our bodies that come to be and cease to be, they are not of that kind. They are not bodies that are always turned towards a soul.
mhm. And so the body world is better somehow. The world's body is a better
The
body than
world,
our body. And like you said, the problem we have is the kind of body we have, really.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
Right. That's also an important point for Plotinus in general. He thinks that qua souls were on a par with the universe. He even calls us soul sisters because we're
hmm
like qua souls were all.
Okay, but it's the body that is the problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, where am I? But has
But
the universe
has
then, but the sensation that I think, but has the universe then no sensation? It has no sight, we read, since it has no eyes, and obviously it has not ears, nostrils, nor tongue. Then, has it perhaps such a consciousness as we have our own inner condition? No. Where all is the working out of one nature, there is nothing but still rest. There's not even enjoyment. Sensibility is present as the quality of growth. Sensibility is present as the quality of growth is unrecognized. But the nature of the world will be found treated elsewhere. What stands here is all that the question of the moment demands. Why
Right.
did he have to talk about the solid world at all here? I don't know.
Because um, because once he said that if we turn away from the body, we no longer give lives to the body, then, there's a question about, well, the soul of the world, it's always giving life to the world, so that means it's always turned towards bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and then is that soul inferior to ours because we can separate from bodies, but it can't? I guess it's this kind of issue. And the argument here again is, he says, well, if Timaeus says it has nothing to see or perceive, so it has none of those external perceptions. Someone asks, well, what about internal perceptions, like when we feel like we're hungry or something, or pleasure or pain? And then he says, no, because since everything works well, you never notice anything. And it has perceptions the same way that we have growth, right? So of course, our nails grow and all kinds of things, and we replenish cells that we lose, but we don't feel that. And the same way, that's and perception is in that way in the world. It never really notices that either. But he'll discuss but the subject now isn't the world. He just mentioned it probably because of this kind of concern about if we
Hmm.
can separate from the body, why doesn't the world soul separate from the body? And the answer is this world soul is separate from the body. It's just that it has a different kind of body.
Right. And the main thing is, which is also the main thing for us, or at least in this life, is not what it has, but what it sort of notices. The
Hmm.
world doesn't notice that it that it has sensation, although it does. Is that
Right. Yeah.
because you don't
So
notice something, it's not there.
it's not you, I guess, is the
Yeah.
idea. Yeah.
And
Um,
that's sort of the main idea of like identifying with the soul or something like that, anyways.
right.
Hmm. Okay.
Now, okay, let's start the fifth chapter. Now, in the fifth chapter, he's going to discuss some of the issues that you raised last time about what the idea of a daimon mean and choosing a daimon means for free will.
Okay. What's left? Okay. But if the presiding spirit and the conditions of life are chosen by the soul in the overworld, so before it's born, how can anything be left our independent action here? The answer is that the very choice in the overworld is merely an allegorical statement of the soul's tendency and temperament, a total character which it must express wherever it operates. Hmm.
Right. So first answer is kind of like what he said before, that just as he said before, the daimon has to act in this life because that's where we actually choose. And he also said, how do we choose the daimon? Oh, it's because we choose which life to live here, and that determines what's the next highest thing. Um, and so here his first thing is, the choice of the daimon is just an allegorical way of talking about our own choice of life now.
Hmm.
What the allegory adds is that you might think that in choosing things, like you're always just choosing, oh, will I answer this person's email, what will I have for lunch, and so on. But what the myth makes it clear is that you're actually choosing to be a certain kind of person all the time, right? And so without the myth that might be forgotten.
But the choice doesn't actually happen between lives.
Yeah.
It's sort of it does. It's in other words, it happens between lives in the sense that you get the kind of body or life, but not the choice doesn't happen then. Okay, but If the tendency of the soul is the master force, and in the soul the dominant is that phase which has been brought to the fore by a previous history, then the body stands acquitted of any bad influence upon it. Or does it? The question. The
Yeah,
soul's
that's a
quality
question.
exists before any bodily life. It has exactly what it chose to have. And we read it never changes its chosen spirit. Therefore, neither the good man nor the bad is the product of this life.
Right. So here he is raising some puzzles about, okay, so let's say that um, we have we through our choices we are free to choose, and we are always choosing a whole kind of life. But but the choice of the body, right, does happen between lives, right? And then we get um, the whatever body that matches the dominant character of our soul. Um, so does that then mean that the body is not responsible for anything? Because you might think, right, a Platonist might want to say, no, part of the reason that we struggle is because we have a body and because of the body we have. And, and what you're saying is that the body is entirely passive in this, right? Because it's always conforms to the soul, right? And um, and then the consequence of this then would be neither the good man nor the bad is the product of this life. Um, so that would also mean that he might be thinking that there's a connection here between being a certain kind of person having a certain kind of body. Um, but I think the idea is more the soul's quality exists before any bodily life. It has exactly what it chose to have. Um, it might also be that he's going back um, to the idea that you choose your body, and the body is a body fit for a certain kind of life. So, for instance, you choose to be a tyrant or you choose to be an animal. The case where you choose to be an animal is clearest, because then, like, well, then you can't live anything but an animal life. So this person can't become rational because they're a dog. Or similarly, this person uh, chose to be born the son of a tyrant, and then like, do they have any choices really to become a philosopher? Things like that.
Mhm. But they don't.
It would seem not. This is a puzzle for him.
Hmm. Is the solution perhaps that man is potentially both good and bad, but becomes the one or the other by force of act? That's a solution to what? I don't know.
Um, I
But,
think
okay, so
the
like that's what we would say. But what if a man temperamentally good happens to enter this disordered body? Or if a perfect body falls to a man naturally vicious? How is it gonna fall? Like, what does it mean to be temperamentally good? Because you chose in the previous life?
yeah, or so I think that this is actually some kind of like a problem of evil, or in some sense, that if our bodies always match the character from our previous life, then there's a problem because we know people who are virtuous and have some kind of bodily defect, and we also know people who are vicious who are in perfect health, in perfect bodies.
Hmm.
Right? So it's a problem for this theory that the soul's quality determines the body they have.
Okay. The answer is that the soul, and there's also people with like bad unhealthy bodies in like a moral sense, maybe. Um, the answer is that the soul, to whichever side it inclines, has in some varying degree the power of working the forms of body over to its own temper. Since outlying and accidental circumstances cannot overrule the entire decision of a soul.
So, yeah, so he's also talking about not just, as you mentioned, there might be like a bodily defect that's morally relevant. So, for instance, if you might have, by the constitution of your body, a tendency to get angry. It's just your blood boils more quickly, right? And that's just a bodily thing. And so his first thing is that, okay, there might be some kind of tendency in that way, but presumably choice and habit can overcome any bodily thing. So you might be predisposed by your body to sleep a lot, but a person who, a virtuous person can still overcome this deficiency of their body.
Hmm. But that's the answer. Where we read that after the casting of lot, the sample lives are exhibited with the casual circumstances attending them, and that the choice is made upon vision in accordance with the individual temperament. We are giving to understand, so that this is like an allegory for, right? That the real
Mhm.
determination lies with the souls who adapt the allotted conditions to their own particular quality. The point is
Right.
supposed to be like if you find yourself with a body that likes to get angry or something like that, your soul actually chose that, which is a way of saying it has power over that.
No, it's like the same way that before the allegory of choosing a life is actually meant to remind you that at every moment you make a choice, you're choosing to be a certain kind of person. The fact that in that allegory it's mentioned that you don't just choose a certain kind of temperament, but people there are said to like choose lives that include, oh, that they get into a shipwreck or something. So that part of the allegory is meant to indicate what he just mentioned, that you do have power over your circumstances. And so if you not only are you always choosing a particular kind of life, but you can master your circumstances. You can master the body you have.
Hmm. Okay, I see. So now it becomes totally this allegory is like the allegory becomes entirely the opposite of the simple meaning. Like it seems to this the myth seems to say that if you have circumstances or a kind of life, both of these things, that they were like you chose them, but they were determined before you were born. And really, this is trying to say that they were not determined before you were born. They're chosen by you now.
Exactly. And so the part of the allegory that he's keeping, as it were, literal, is that we do live many lives, and we do move from different kinds of life, from human lives to animal lives to plant lives to daimonic lives to all these. So that's true, but all the choice happens in life, right? And then the consequences of choice from moving from one life to another, that's all, as it were, determined by the choices that we made in life.
Mhm.
And this is part of reconciling this passage from the Timaeus, from the Republic, with other passages like in the Phaedo, where it seems like we don't have a choice. Right? So like the diamond is given to you.
Mhm. The Timaeus indicates the relation of this guiding spirit to ourselves. It is not entirely outside of ourselves. It is not bound up with our nature. It is not the agent of our action. It belongs to us as belonging to our soul, but not insofar as we are particular human beings living a life to which it is superior.
Uh,
There was a lot of things that isn't and isn't.
Right. So again, the Timaeus, what does the Timaeus say? The Timaeus identifies it with the rational part of our soul. So the Timaeus seems to be like one of the clearest, as it were, passages where it says that the daimon is not a separate being from us. And here he's taking that up in the sense that he says that it is in sense that this Timaeus helps him here to allegorize further the or to confirm his allegorization of the Republic passage, right? Because it's not that you chose this life between worlds and then you were given a daimon, right? That was this external thing. Rather, you're choosing now, and the daimon is something in you, and it is not entirely outside ourselves, and it is not bound up with our nature. It is not the agent of our action, right? As he said, it's the thing above the agent. It is not itself the agent. It belongs to us as belonging to our soul, but not insofar as we are particular human beings living a life to which it is superior. So he clarifies it. So he says, the daimon belongs to the soul because the soul is all things. But it's not the logos, the rational capacity you are using in living your day-to-day life. That would be too demythologizing, so to speak. That would make it too um, imminent, right? Um, he says you have to see it. It is the higher part of the soul, but not necessarily of who you are in this life that you chose, right? And so it says take the passage in this sense, and it is consistent with the other passages in Plato. Understand this spirit otherwise, this daimon of the Timaeus otherwise, and there is contradiction.
Hmm. Um, okay. It belongs in one sense. Okay, take it to passages in this sense and consistent. Understand the spirit other than consistent. And the description of the spirit, moreover, as the power which consummates the chosen life, is also in agreement with this interpretation. For while its presidency saves us from falling much deeper into evil, the only direct agent within us is the same thing, is something neither above it nor equal to it, but under it. Man cannot cease to be characteristically man.
Right. So here he turns to a different description of the daimon from the Republic again, where it says it's what consummates the chosen life. So the idea is, of course, you choose a life which includes like shipwrecks and getting married. Shipwrecks and getting married aren't just up to you, and so the daimon like makes sure these things happen, right? And 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 of course that would make it uh and so you have to find a way to allegorize this. And um, he says, its presidency saves us from falling much deeper into evil. The only direct agent within us is something neither above it nor equal it, but under it. Man cannot cease to be characteristically man. So he's saying then that it does um, the in some sense this higher moment of ourselves, right, which we said is variable. Um, And of course, we do not actually, since it's always higher, it's not actually the level of living um, that we achieve. But it does, in a sense, keep us from falling too low, right? And in that sense, it confirms or is a something that preserves our freedom, right? The us living the life we choose to live. This is an interesting point, I think, about how this structure of action. So the fact that there's, as it were, always a higher ideal that that we do not fulfill. This actually has some role in preserving our own freedom. So if we did not have this higher, if we're not aware of anything higher that we wanted to aspire to,
Hmm.
and if we just, oh, we live our life and we are completely, as it were, bound um, to the life we want to live. So, you want to pursue a life of pleasures, and that's what you do, and you're not conscious of there being anything better, or you want to live the life of an accountant, and that's what you do. Then there there wouldn't even be, as it were, a norm for that life, right? You could just choose, then whatever you chose, that would simply be the life you chose, and you would always be living the life you lead. And so you could, as it were, imperceptibly end up living a completely different life than the life that you chose, because there wasn't this higher level. So the fact that the life that we choose to lead is actually a specific life that's less perfect than another life, that's what it makes this choice determinate and specific, and therefore is a condition or something that guarantees our freedom, our ability to choose.
Mm.
Um, and this man cannot cease to be characteristically man. That sounds very nice, but the Greek can plausibly be better taken to refer um, to the daimon. So it could be also like the daimon cannot cease to be of the level that it is. Um, Let me get here um, the exact Greek for us. And right, the Greek doesn't have a clear subject, but it's probably the same subject as what was just said. Um, uh, yeah. So yeah, I think it would be that the daimon can't be other than it is.
Mhm.
Um, right. If we wanted to understand this as what's below the daimon, that could also work. Um, so then it would be something like, um, wait a minute, that acts only, but only what is below it acts. Right. I guess it's, hmm. Yeah, no, I think that would be difficult to read. I think the diamond interpretation is more plausible. Um, okay, so that brings us now to the last chapter, which we can leave for next time. It's a bit longer than the others.
Mhm.
Um, uh, but
Um,
so today we saw his idea of what the daimon is, that it's always this next highest thing, and we saw how he allegorizes lots of the myth of Ur.
mhm. It comes the basic upshot is that I mean one is that the di we got this idea that the diamond is not you but something like the next level or maybe the next level present because really everything should have everything as he said.
Hmm.
And then that this is like his basic theory is that everything depends on the choice that you have in this life in the end of the day. All the stories with all these stories with choice between lives are allegories for choice within this life, and that is basic theory,
Right.
right? And he pushes everything into that.
And and also what's important for our study of virtue is that it means that I mean, he didn't really focus on this point, but an important point is that we can live higher than human lives. And in on virtue, we saw about how we can lead higher than human lives in the sense that we can turn towards the nous. And that would be like living the daimonic life. But here he also mentioned quickly, but then he didn't elaborate on it, who then becomes a god, right? The one who lives a god here. And so there's a puzzle. What is this godlike thing? Right? What does this god look like?
Hmm.
Um, and later Neoplatonists will pick that up. So next week we will finish this text.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
not
gonna
next week,
be
at the end of the month,
2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, and the
yeah, after
27th, I
Pesach.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah. And once we're done with this text, we'll stop with Plotinus for a while. We'll move to Porphyry.
Okay.
Um, Tell me if you do have access. There is an English translation of Porphyry's launching points to the intelligible. Okay. Tell me if you find it. Okay. If not,
So send me a link at least to something, and I'll see if I
okay.
can.
Okay. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Because then we're going to read one passage from this book of Porphyry's, which is his version of On Virtue.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. This was fun, and
It's okay.
well, happy holidays. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. It's fun. Bye bye.